POZ** is the artist tag and signature of illustrator and papercut artist Peter Zierlein. His illustration client list includes the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Nation, the Guardian, and other national and international publications. For the past 10 years, Peter has been creating an extensive body of intricate paper cuts. I draw with a knife, Peter says, of his techniques, cutting forms into folded paper to create framed art, fine art prints, graphic design, wallpaper, illustrations, posters, mural, public art, wall sculpture, and recently plywood boats. He works and lives with his family in Northampton, Massachusetts. Welcome, Peter. Thank you for joining me today to have this conversation about your creativity.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. I'm really excited to have this conversation and share what you do with your art, because it's a little bit unique from what people are used to. And I think that's really a great thing to be able to share that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do as an artist and a little bit about your process.
Well, I can say that maybe for the last 10 years or so, I've been consistently working in the medium of paper cut. And before that, my entire career was working as an editorial illustrator, which I still do, but I answer all my illustration assignments in the form of a paper cut. And it's brought me to new areas in the field. Like I'm now doing a lot of graphic design. I do wallpaper design and stuff like that. I do fine art collages and sell them in like for doctors' waiting room offices and stuff like that.
Okay.
I still do a lot of illustration, and I do public art and poster designs and things like that, because I used to be stuck on just editorial illustration. It was my bread and butter during the time when magazine and newspapers were, still the thing. And in 2008, everything faltered. We together did the MFA in Boston at the Art Institute of Boston. And since then, I really had to look for new clients and a new way to apply myself, because my old clients dried up. And again, it brought me to this interesting thing of paper cutting. And I've been doing a lot of public art. I've gotten even into doing sculpture, and lately into building plywood boats, which are derived also from paper cut patterns that are simply transferred onto plywood. And that's given me the biggest kicks these days.
Nice. Where do you get your inspiration? Like, how do you come up with an idea for one of your designs?
Well, if it's a job like an illustration job, the theme of the work is implied, but otherwise I'm influenced by things that I see every day, politics. When I read the paper, I did a lot of posters during this Trump presidency, and my posters were featured in the Guardian in London, in the newspaper, for work that was done, political posters during the Trump time. I could say it's almost in the past, but it upset me so that gave me a lot of inspiration. Not only the figure of Trump, but also our daily problems, the environment and things like that are a big problem. And it's on my mind all the time, and I do work that relates to it. My wife and I just signed a contract with we wrote and I illustrated a children's book with the theme of "Don't Eat the Plastic," and it's all about avoiding plastic garbage. It's a children's book. It's some animals, like an alligator finds garbage in her swamp and finds that other animals are, getting inflicted by the garbage too, and how they figure out to help themselves and to clean up, and what it takes to bring this stuff into the garbage. But it's not, it's very little, but I think as an artist, I try to reflect on the world around me.
I think that's wonderful. Not all art is really necessarily meant to be something to um, have in your home, but sometimes it is meant to bring about awareness. And I think that's a really great aspect. Not that we can't display it in our home to remind us, but I think it is an important part of some artists' life is to get out there and talk about the issues that we face in the world.
For sure.
Um, how does that affect your approach as a creative person in the community? Um, it seems like a lot of the work you are doing right now is kind of community based. It's meant for more than just one individual, but many.
Yeah, it's, are you talking about public art or like these poster designs and stuff?
Well, I think we could talk about the public art. Yeah, like what do you feel your role as a creative in your community is?
I think I'm supposed to bring good images to these people. I'm so lucky. I live in a really hip town. It's called Northampton in Massachusetts. It's the lesbian capital of the world. It really is, and it's a interesting and very liberal place. Um, and thank goodness it does a lot for your sanity, or for my sanity anyway, to live here. I feel I can fit in with all the other stuff. Nice place. And so in this town, I feel like I have to be, this is maybe self-entitled, but I feel I want to be the ambassador of good design and good visuals in this town. And I have quite a few of public art pieces here in town and also in the area at large, and neighboring towns. Um, Not only because I want to set a point, I want to bring some good mood and something good into the world. We've been living in such a dreary time um, that and whatever visuals you see, including my own, were often had to do with political things and so on. And so my public art is a stance to create something that's joyous to look at. High and
Nice.
mighty, right?
Okay. So, has the pandemic affected your work or your ideas around your work?
It's affected me in that I had to give up my studio in the place where I rented a nice studio. They because of COVID closed everything down, and I couldn't work in there anymore. Um, and I quit paying for the rent for the so I don't have it anymore. Um, and I'm working here in my home. I can show you a little bit. I work in this little room that we have. It's more like a tool shed for me, but it's nice. It does the trick. Um, so with that, also with that whole COVID, I lost the opportunity of a couple of exhibitions, one group show and two single shows, one of which was at Westfield College, which is a local community college. But those are nice shows because again, you get to know your community and exchange a little bit. And you ask how the COVID influences me. It kills me that I don't get to see people anymore. I feel confined to my house, and I'm paranoid to go out. I'm not an anti-masker, believe me. I stay at home if I can. I shop with curbside pickup and stuff like that. So I really miss seeing people and being social and being with others and so on. So that's another thing how COVID influenced my work itself. Maybe the themes have changed. In the beginning, I was having so many nightmares about this COVID that I was kind of not nightmares. It was my brain was racing. My 18-year-old son. how's he growing up through COVID-18? You know, beautiful body, you're given all this equipment and nowhere to go with it. The COVID puts you in the cold. And you know what I mean? And just the circumstance to grow up is not very nice. I miss my social life, going out. I miss the gym, the sauna, the swimming, you know, the whole thing. So the circumstance has influenced my work, but I'm still doing paper cut and boat building.
Sure, sure. Do you ever experience creative block or moments where you just are struggling to come up with an idea or concept?
Not not really. I kind of have an obsessive mind. Like I wrap my head around something, some idea or whatever, and then I do a lot of it. I
Okay.
do the same thing maybe from different angles or whatever. I try to do a lot, and I don't have a shortage of ideas. I have more ideas than I can really do, and I have more plans than I can go after.
Do you have any artists that have influenced your work?
Well, as of recent, yeah, the visuals. No, I'm not very influenced by other people's uh, visuals. Maybe by like fashion trends in the world of illustration. You know how things go. Um, but it's not really where I'm looking at. I feel pretty free um, in my expression. Because I'm filtering every creative idea sort of as a, how is it going to look as a paper cut? And if possible, how is it going to look as a symmetrical paper cut? It's a spleen that I have, the symmetrical paper cuts.
Okay.
So that kind of, it keeps me always focused and feeding into that same thing, you know? What was the question again?
Well, just if you've been influenced by other people, or if you've even experienced creative block where you
Yeah,
struggle to come up with ideas. But
yeah.
you know,
I
I really
enjoy
get
other people's art. I look at other people's art, but concepts more than visuals influence me.
okay.
Ideas more than visuals.
So what outside concepts influence you? Um, you know, what non-art things come into your life? And I imagine with your illustration work, you know, you're kind of given ideas and concepts, but
Yeah.
um, do you draw inspiration from other aspects of life?
Yeah, sure. From my personal life, from my emotional life, uh, like I said, much of what's going on in society and how I see it. Um, yeah, everything around me could somehow inspire something in me. Um, I I like to watch YouTube videos when I'm not doing anything, and that's cool because you can see stuff that you can see things that you never think about, like alien ideas and concepts, you know, that you haven't thought about, and that's
Mhm.
kind of great. You can that that can play on the head a lot, you know.
What kind of advice would you give to somebody thinking of having a life and career as a creative individual?
I think if you work hard and you figure out how to apply your art so that it is commercially feasible, that something comes back, then you can make a career out of it. If you want to be a fine artist that who produces work for the sake of it, you have to. It's not that you don't have chances, and I'm not belittling it, but it puts you in a spot where you are economically dependent, and either you're lucky and you have money that somehow comes from at home or whatever, um, or you pick up a good gallery or something like this. But um, I think in the first place, make sure that you have a trade, something that you can monetize, something that can be your bread and butter. And then you can go after being an artist. And maybe to anybody, you find out very quickly if you're Dali or if you're Picasso, or if you're any of these people. And if you're not, it doesn't mean that you can't be an artist, but you just have to really work hard and strategize as at it. My income does not come alone from drawing little pictures and building little plywood boats. I have to teach courses, teach in schools until recently. I was teaching at a high school as an art teacher for the last 2 years, and you asked me what COVID, how that influenced my thing. One of the hardest decisions I had to make was to give up this job because I didn't think their precautions were good enough to prevent the spread of COVID, and I had to make the decision to quit that job. It was very hard for me to do because it's comfortable to in a place where I'm good at it. It's you have an instant social life, and the students are so much fun, and the whole thing is great, and you get a paycheck and whatever. I had to give that up, and I had to go back to being a freelancer. So, like I said, it's good to have some legs to stand on. I always imagine a chair that it has to have some legs under it, and you can't let all the legs fly away. Like you have to have at least maybe 3 to keep that thing standing. So 3 legs where some money comes in.
Do you have other things that you would like to say about being an artist?
I just hinted a few times that I'm into building and designing and so on boats. Like
Sure.
this. And that came over me like a crack addiction.
Okay.
I got into a boat, and it worked on me, and I had to build a boat and have my own and whatever. I built this small plywood boat. It's 8.5 feet long, and I finally found online is a group of people that build little boats like that, and it really caused for me something that I couldn't. I haven't been faced with that in my life before. It sounds boring and all. I'm sorry, but like I have no problem being an artist and also being, for example, a swimmer. I like to swim, or a runner or something like that. But to be an artist and also to be all of a sudden like a crack addict, interested in these boats and doing everything is boats around me. Everything. I'll show you more. When I do my studio tour, I have models that I build, and I dream about it at night, and it really obsesses me. And I had to somehow find a justification as an artist. You know what I mean? That's okay to have something that's not immediately like it's not painting and drawing, So check this out. Because it's COVID, in that building where all those artist studios are, it's a beautiful building. It's an old factory, brick factory that was converted into artist studios, and it has these wooden floors and tall ceilings, and it's an artist loft. Like when you close your eyes and you think artist loft, that's the place. With big windows, with those grids, and you look out on Mount Tom. Of this fantastic scenery, and it's just fantastic. So this place had a gallery that was booked up and whatever, and now because of COVID, all the shows were canceled, and they regretted that beautiful space, another one of those lofts, is sitting empty, and they put an artist call out for anybody that would want to do a residency in those. And talk about those boats. I applied. I said, I want to build artist boats, an artist that builds a boat, and whatever I awarded me, or however you say that, a residency for 2 months to be building my boat in this artist loft, and I'm so psyched for it. And I overcame the difference between being an artist or a boat builder or whatever. It goes together. I told them that the boats are based on paper cuts, which it's true. Something that I found from cutting paper is I can turn this stuff into sculpture, and it opened up a whole new world for me, really. And including something as cool as a boat, which is easy enough for anybody with two left hands like me to do at home, to build your own boat. And then you go out on the water and.
Well, I think the really important part about your new interest in building these boats is, you really have woven creativity throughout many aspects of your life. It's not just the singular thing that you do when you have time or as a job, but you're applying it to many facets of your life, from the work you do as a freelancer to teaching to learning and designing these boat ideas. And I think that's a really important thing I'd like to share with our viewers, is that creativity doesn't have to be a singular aspect in your life, but it can be woven through just about any aspect of your life. And I think you are a really great example of how rich of a life that gives you when you do that.
Well, I tell you, when we went through this master program, I sort of had how do you call this? Like I had a thing in my head about, hey, I'm an illustrator and this is a fine art program. So how do you define yourself as an illustrator versus a fine art? I don't know. It's a weird thing. I don't know how to explain it to you, but how do I want to see myself? Like, who am I in this whole thing? And now I've come to embrace back then to say, okay, I'm also a fine artist. And I think that embrace gave me the freedom to, for example, apply for public art jobs and things like that, which again has opened up a horizon, new clients, much different way of getting income and stuff. It's great, it's a good thing. And now I am learning to embrace that being a designer doesn't separate me from being an illustrator or a fine artist. Or a swimmer for that matter. Like I can be all of those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But whatever. Our brains are so small. At least mine. I'm having to do with those 10%. I'm probably at 4. So,
could you tell us about the paper cutting process? Because that's an art form that we might not see a lot in the United States. And so could you explain to us kind of how you go about doing it, what materials you use?
Let me grab my tools for a second. Paper cutting is a really old art form. It goes back to, I think, the 4th century. The oldest surviving paper cut is 1,500 years old. In the 4th century, no, in 100 or so AD, the Chinese invented paper. And as soon as they had tools, they could do paper cutting. And the one surviving paper cut, I can also send you a picture of that, is an especially intricate, like a beautiful example of a multi-symmetrical paper cut. And you would be surprised that pretty much every society that has paper on every continent, every continent and every culture that has paper and that has these tools were doing or are doing paper cut in one way or another. It's a real folk art. And in the United States, there is paper cut that came from the Dutch Germans, from in Lancaster County, from the Mennonites, or I forget what these people are called. But you know what I mean,
right.
In Lancaster County. And there's a culture of paper cutting where, for example, if a couple gets married, they traditionally get a paper cut as the contract, as the marriage contract that gets displayed on the wall. Or if they bury someone, they make a paper cut pertaining to that person's life, and either they burn the paper cut or they put it on the dead body and bury it with them.
Fascinating.
Yeah, also in the Jewish community, paper cut is a big thing. In religious Jewish households, the east wall of the home, the wall where you direct your prayer, in religious homes might be or may be marked with a mitzvah, and it's a religious paper cut that tells you the way to bow east, and they're both it's very beautiful, and it's a live culture. Like there is practicing paper cut artists here in the States that do these traditional forms of paper cut, and there's also contemporary paper cutters. Probably one of the best known is Kara Walker.
Sure.
And she's a paper cut artist. You would be surprised in how many fields paper cut art is important. Like, for example, South Park is made with paper cut animation. Then you know the comic.
I do. Yes. Yes.
And other things too, like in graphic design, or I know that the Chinese community still practices paper cutting on red origami paper for gift giving and stuff like that. It's quite a thing that's still alive. And what else do they do paper cutting? It's, of course, Mexicans, Day of the Dead. If you think of the decorations that are strapped across the street in Mexico on the Day of the Dead, yeah, I'm sure you've seen them, even if you go in a Mexican restaurant to have a tequila. And when you're in the bar, you see these paper cuts. They're made out of plastic nowadays. But the original ones that hang across the street in a town in Mexico, they were done with tissue paper. They're done a stack of 50 of them on thin tissue paper, and the person that cuts them out uses a chisel and a mallet to chop the shapes out, and that's how you get so many copies of it. And again, they're made from the thinnest paper, and they're strung on these flimsy strings. And I think that the idea is that when the weather and whatever works on these paper cuts, or when it rains or whatever happens, these paper cuts are very ephemeral. They're only around for a short amount of time, and that must in some way connect to the cult of the Day of the Dead in my mind. The reminiscence that life is short and so on, like in so many other art forms, is transmitted through the idea of having a very flimsy thing that commemorates your dead people, or the brevity of your life.
Yes. How thick is the paper you use? Do you use a thinner sheet, or do you what type of paper are you using?
For when I sit around bored and I do nothing else, I just use the computer printer paper. Those 8.5 by 11 that you feed in your printer. I like to use also a little bit bigger, the 11 by 17 paper. If I have to do a job where it's important that the thing holds together and that the graphics are nice and clean, when I cut something at home, it doesn't matter. Maybe I post it on Instagram or so. It doesn't matter to me if it's that clean. But if I need a real clean job, I work on a drafting paper that's a little bit thicker, that has 350 grams per square meter GSM. 350 GSM. It's a heavier kind of paper, but you can use any type of paper. If I do stencils that I want to spray paint through for a mural or something like this, I use an even heavier kind. Now, other paper cut artists, they use Tyvek, I might be pronouncing that wrong, Tyvek paper. the same that you find in construction and so on. It's just a heavy duty paper, and it has great qualities. It doesn't tear so easy and so on, but I don't know, I never get around to picking that up. I just use what I have laying around me. And sometimes I get these big rolls when I know I'm doing something large. And I just like the paper. I like the way it feels.
Sure. What's the largest paper cut you've made?
The largest that was the paper itself, where I cut every piece, was probably 10 by 12 feet, and it was 4 rolls of paper glued together and then folded and then cut. So that was pretty big. But the biggest piece I got was, I did a paper cut on a 11 by 17, and it was then transferred onto aluminum, 3/16 aluminum, and blown up to be 12 by 24. Wait, am I saying that right? Something like that, 12 by 24 feet, 2 stories tall. 2 stories tall, and very wide. A big piece. And these paper cuts, you can enlarge them or make them small. They always look great and graphically very sharp, because I'm using this knife, these X-Acto knives. I don't have messy lines to deal with and to figure out if the line that I drew is outside of what I'm drawing or if it's within the thing that I'm drawing and whatever. This makes one final decision for you, and it's gone. And there's something very liberating about doing clean lines. I found that I can even do a sloppy drawing and use this weapon to clean it up. And in graphic design, just like in the kitchen, cleanliness is next to godliness. So always good to have graphically clean things that you can then use in your graphic design. I also do logos and stuff like that that are then based on paper cut. I'll just give you the fly around of my room, of this tiny little, it's like a maybe 9, 10 by 12 feet, 10 by 14 feet, small room. But anyway, here are some posters on the wall. Those are my paper cuts. But otherwise, my walls are pretty bare. That's my monitor and my busted computer. That's why it looks so weird when I look into the screen. This is, like I say, I keep mostly my tools and my stuff here. Fills and things. Oh, this might be interesting. This is my book. Jeff, I can send you pictures of that close up.
That would be great.
And these are some of my models here.
Wonderful.
I can give you the noises if you want. Here, I basically try to sketch out with paper how this could look, and I bring it to scale. 1 inch is a foot, and then I can photocopy and size that up, that model, to be to find out how to cut it on plywood. I threw out lots of books. Here's my work table. This is a job that I worked on just last week. It's a memorial for fallen police officers in Ohio. Here is stuff for a paper cutting class. And in fact, this is my station where I tape my entire paper cutting class. printer. And here is where I sit when I'm in front of my computer. And this is the view of my room.